Today, I wanted to give you guys a few tips for how to keep your legs long, keep your feet in the stirrup, and keep your toes forward, because I know that this is something that a lot of riders struggle with. It's something that I struggled with when I was first coming to dressage after doing a little bit more Western riding. So I hope that you like this video. Give me a thumbs up, like my channel, and then also check out the links below. I have a free rider assessment quiz which gives you a great idea of your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about is finding your correct stirrup length, because if your stirrups are too short or too long, then it's difficult to find this nice correct leg position with your heels down. If your stirrups are too long, it's going to mean that you're kind of reaching for your stirrups, which is going to make it impossible to put your heels down. And if your stirrups are too short, it's just going to jam your leg up, which may cause you to turn your knee and your toe out. So the way that you know if your stirrups are the correct length is you're going to drop your stirrups, and the bottom of your stirrup should be at your ankle bone. So like I actually had to just shorten these stirrups because they were too long. But when I drop my stirrups, I should feel like the bone of my ankle is right where the stirrup is. That's how you know if your stirrups are the correct length. So a lot of people have trouble keeping their heels down because they have tight calves and their ankles aren't flexible. So they physically can't find that. So I'm going to give you 2 tips to get your heels down. The first one is what I have people do is try doing a half seat. So in a half seat, what you want to think about is your bum's gonna come a little out of the saddle. You don't want your seat to go way forward, and you don't want to lean way forward. So you want to keep your center of balance over the horse. And basically when you come forward into the half seat, your upper body tips a little forward, your seat bones come out of the saddle, and you want to feel the weight go down into your heels. So instead of when you're in a normal seat, you have weight on your seat bones and weight in your stirrups. When you're in a half seat, you just have the weight going down into your heels. And it's important when you do this that you don't grip with your knees, because you want your knees should always be able to hinge. Your knees need to be able to, that your lower leg can move forward and back. So when you do this, really think about just dropping the weight into your heels. So you can do your half seat when you're walking. You can do it at the trot and the canter. I mean, for most of my students, if I'm just trying to get them to stretch out their ankles and their calves, like at the beginning of the ride, I'll just have them kind of while they're walking around, just play around with like a little bit half seat. And then when you sit back down again, really think about keeping those legs long. And then you can do a little bit half seat again. Just really, I'm feeling like I'm stretching, maybe exaggerating a little bit, stretching my heels down. I'm trying to keep still like that my heels are under my hips. So I'm not, like when I do the half seat, I'm not going like this, because if your legs go too far forward, you're not going to be able to get your bum out of the saddle. So even in the half seat, you need to keep your heels under your hips. So I'll show you. Mainly I just use it at the walk. It's hard to do at the trot on a dressage horse in a dressage saddle. You can do that a little bit, and you can do it a little bit at the canter. But for the purposes of just getting your legs a little longer, I think that honestly just doing it at the walk is enough. So again, a half seat is not quite as extreme as a 2-point, but I'm just kind of lightening my seat and really letting the weight drop into my heels. Good boy. Good boy. So the second tip that I have to help you get your heels down and keep your feet in the stirrups is, a lot of times at the beginning of the ride, I'll have my riders just drop their stirrups, and you'll feel right away when you drop your stirrups, all the weight is now on your seat bones because you don't have any weight going in your stirrups, in your feet, so all the weight goes on your seat bones. And this one, you'll feel your hips start to swing a little bit more. You'll feel immediately when you drop your stirrups, your legs get longer. And then you can just kind of, while you're walking around, do some ankle circles. It's important when you're riding that your ankles are flexible because your ankles need to move a little bit to absorb the motion of the horse. And also your ankles need to be able to move to kick your horse and influence your horse with your leg. So you have to have flexibility in your ankles, and your calves need to be loose enough that you can find this correct leg position. Now, it's important. I mean, yes, you want to have pressure on your stirrups, and yes, you want to have your heels down, but you don't want to be like jamming your leg forward. So another point is that you want to, when your stirrup is on your foot, when your stirrup is on your foot, you want your stirrup to be perpendicular to your foot. That's important. You don't want your stirrup to be like at an angle like this. You want it to be perpendicular. I don't have a cookie, silly boy. You want it to be perpendicular and right on the ball of your foot. Now you want your heels to be, I would say, a few inches lower than your toes, but you don't want to jam your heel down. So a lot of times when riders are trying to get their heels down, they end up doing this, and that puts you in a chair seat. So I no longer have that alignment of my ear, shoulder, hip, heel because my heel's too far forward. So this is not putting your heels down. You need to keep your leg in the correct position and have flexibility enough in your ankles and in your calves to get your heels down. Okay, so the last topic for today is how to get your toes forward. So a lot of us, it may be like how we're put together or how we walk around or how we do things all the time. I used to be really bad about this, is that our toes turn out when we are riding. Just stand here, good boy. So if you find yourself that when you're riding your toes turn out, and you'll probably hear from your instructor, put your toes in. It's pretty impossible when you're like this to get your toes in. Like, I can try really hard to put my toes forward, and it's just really not possible because if your thigh and your hip is rotated out, there's no way that you can get your toe in. So if you hear your instructor tell you to turn your toes in, you need to start by thinking about your hip. So what you need to do is, let me turn sideways to show you. So if you are told turn your toes in, you actually need to kind of like rotate your hip in like that. So you saw how I actually kind of like grabbed the back of my thigh, pulled it back, and then my whole thigh and my knee are now rotated inward, and automatically my toe goes forward because your toe is pretty much always in line with your knee. So again, if your toe is out, you need to rotate from your thigh and from your hip and get your toes pointing forward. There's a famous dressage rider, Stephen Peters. He's an American. You may or may not know him, but you'll notice almost every time he goes to the walk, he kind of like takes his thighs off his horse and really rotates his thigh in and his toe forward. Because what that does is when you are in this position, it allows your seat to really move more correctly with the horse. So let me just show you a little bit while I'm walking around. I think that a lot of times too, when you're at the halt or whatever, you can get this nice correct leg position, but like if your horse isn't going, you'll find yourself like drawing your heel up, your knee comes up over the saddle because you're trying to get a reaction from the horse. So one tip that I always tell my students is like, use your leg and then make your leg long again. So like if my horse isn't going and I have to kick him, like because he's kind of asleep right now, so if I have to kick him to make him go. I'm going to use my leg, but then I'm really going to focus on getting my leg long again and getting my heel down, getting my toes to the front by really thinking about from my hip rotating my knee and my thigh forward and into the saddle. So let me know in the comments if this is helpful, and I hope that it helps you kind of figure out how to find the correct leg position, but also find ways when you're not riding to be thinking about your leg position. Like I used to, when I would walk, I would always walk with my toes outward, and so that carried over to the riding. So be sure when you're walking that you walk with your toes forward. Make sure that if you have tight calves or tight ankles that you're stretching those before you get in the saddle. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Okay, the end.